Welcome to Dave and Dom Demystify, a fintech futures podcast, helping make sense of the world of fintech and digital finance. Please sit back and listen as the two Ds take a subject and discuss it to make it clearer and easier to understand.
Demystify.
Welcome to the Dave and Dom Demystify show, and this week we have a real person, not an AI. It is the one and only David Jarvis, who is coming onto the show for a second time. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for having me as well, Dharmesh. So, too many David.
So we're going to have to go with Dave 1 and Dave 2 now.
I was on a panel at Money 2020 talking about the growth stage funding gap in the UK. And it got picked up by this article by this journalist who wrote, "Bank boss decries lack of funding for growth stage companies." And so if you want, I will also answer now to bank boss.
Oh, I love that.
I'm going with Bank Boss.
Yeah, Dharmesh, he can have sidekick me and bank boss David. So there you go.
You've been on before, and what caught our attention, Dave, or Bank Boss, was that this announcement around Agentic and what you're doing around Agentic banking. So pray do tell us all, what is going on at Griffin? How come you're ahead of the curve? And what is this Agentic stuff that you're doing?
So I think, God, I mean, that's an incredibly broad question to open with, by the way. I mean, you're just like I could just talk for like 30 minutes now.
I was going to say, you can either give us the long answer or the short one. And it could be
why don't we start with what we've actually done, and then we can go into how we ended up doing it and what is happening now that we've done it, if that makes sense. So what we've done has been to release an MCP server, which for the AI uninitiated is essentially a way of providing an AI with context about how to talk to some other system. And I'm a software engineer. I think an MCP server, the name MCP server itself is somewhat misleading. Like what an MCP server actually is, literally, is a configuration file that you give to an AI model. And the configuration file says, these are the API endpoints you can talk to, and here's what they do. Why did we do this? We did this because what we were observing in sales calls with customers was they were pointing AI models and the sort of chat interfaces that they deal with directly at our API documentation and saying, build me a fintech application. That actually worked pretty well because at the end of the day, the AI, looks at our API documentation. It's all largely natural language. The AI sort of figures it out. But it does run the risk of not being really, like the API documentation is designed for humans. It is not designed for an AI to ingest, whereas an MCP server is literally a configuration context loader for an AI. Because we could see that people were doing this, and then literally like in a sales call, building an application prototype for what they wanted to do with the API, and then in some cases loading that into our sandbox test environment, and then being able to like actually run queries against the AI and have those largely work. We were like, okay, cool. We can improve everyone's quality of life here by not having you point this at the API documentation, but having it point at the MCP server instead, in which case you know that the AI will just know how to sort of handle this. The thing that's really interesting about that is it opens up the potential for, once you've got the application built, you to then be able to do all manner of sort of agentic tasks with it. And so you can say things like, hey, open a bank account for me, or hey, how much, tell me the transaction history, or make a payment. And this in and of itself is also interesting because where we're seeing some of the boundaries of current sort of agentic behavior is people can get AI agents to do all manner of things, plan a holiday for me, right? So I want to go to these hotels, I want these plane flights, blah, blah, blah. And then the perimeter of the agent's capability is the point at which it actually has to engage in commerce and give some money to the person on the other side. And so we're sort of following this to its natural conclusion and saying, all right, in some of those contexts, it makes sense for you to potentially be able to set up a card, right, that gets allocated to the AI. And that is eventually something that we'll be able to support as well. In other cases, you might actually want to be able to provide not just the card, but the full context on how much money is even in the account, right? So before the AI goes to spend the money, let's make sure that the money's actually there. And so this opens up other really, really interesting use cases. And the one that I think has the most near-term potential is Treasury. and corporate treasury in particular. Because if you look at the context that having access to a company's bank account and indeed banking operations provides for not necessarily a small firm, but any kind of mid-market corporate and up, you have like human beings who exist as that, and they're running an entire function called corporate treasury. And their job is literally to run one problem. And the problem is, how do I maximize my yield on cash while making sure that I have funds available to deal with my accounts payable, accounts receivable, and general cash flow over some time period. And it turns out that like you can just give that task to an AI if it has the context of here is what the historic inflows and outflows of this account are, and here are what my options are to increase yield over that time period. And so that's where we get most excited about it. And it's also where other banks seem to pee themselves. So having released this, we've had a number of banks reach out to us and say, we have realized that this could replace corporate treasury entirely. How do we buy this from you? And we're like, we don't know how to answer that question because we built it for our infrastructure and for our customers. It's not built for us to extract it from our banking thing and to drop it into your bank. We're like, I mean, we're very happy to have you pay us some ridiculous amount of money, and our engineers will go and consult for your engineers and tell you how to do this. But it's not a product that you can buy, that a bank can buy from us. Our customers can buy it. And then there's a next level alternative version of this, which is setting the corporate stuff aside. Let's think about any number of individual sort of agentic applications. Let's say you want to have an agentic wealth manager, for instance, and you want to say, hey, this is my risk profile, make a bunch of recommendations for me, and then go and buy these assets. You're going to need probably someone who has trading and custody permissions that also has an MCP server. But that agent is still going to need the context on cash available, and they're still going to need our MCP server as well. So they're going to need these kind of multiple MCP servers that provide them holistically with all of the context that they need to be able to do those jobs. And the thing that kind of pivots a little bit here is that then your security model changes. So you don't just so like for our customers generally, right, they will integrate directly with the bank. So they'll be wealth managers, right? They'll integrate directly with the bank. Their API key will give them access to that comprehensive bank integration. They then will limit the data that actually gets passed on to an individual customer of the wealth manager. When you're dealing with an agentic agent that will ideally have limited scope for that customer, you want to limit actually the scope of what that agent can see as well. You don't want that agent to see all of the customer accounts. You want to be able to say, actually, this agent should only be able to see the things that are relevant to that customer. So you probably also need to be able to generate like per agent keys, et cetera. But this is kind of like where we are, where we've come from, what we see happening. It's very early, and obviously all of this stuff is moving super quickly, but somehow we've kind of accidentally found ourselves here.
And I know you said kind of the mid to large corporates are kind of looking at this from your client base. But when I speak to all manner of people that, have got no background in coding.
Well, the mid to large corporates are specifically looking, it's the use case we put in front of them, which is, hey, you could just automate corporate treasury entirely.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I'm just going to say that I've got all manner of people that have got no coding experience, really proud to tell me, Dom, have a look at this app that I've just got built, as if they built it themselves. But I mean, some of it is pretty amazing, especially using things like Lovable. Like a sales guy I know, he's got no background in coding, has built a complete sales dashboard for reporting up through the organization. It's phenomenal, the stuff that's being built. So giving access to your bank data is, I guess we had it with open banking, but you still needed to have a development team. But if you don't need to have the dev team now, and also if it's not just about retrieval of data, but it's doing some actions as well, then really the world is your oyster when it comes to banking integration, right?
Yeah, and I think this is like a really interesting point, is what actions require human consent and how frequently, and how is consent managed and delegated, right? So with your sort of traditional open banking, you've got your account information service version, where broadly you're doing sort of one consent, and that consent is going to stay active for some fairly prolonged period of time, hopefully. With payment initiation, you have either approvals like per payment, right? Which again, is a totally reasonable way to think about things in the normal historic context of how we do banking. Or potentially VRPs, where you're like, okay, cool, this is going to be a recurring payment of some shape and form, and I want to constrain it in these ways. What's interesting about this kind of more agentic world is the idea that you would actually say, I mean, let's just name the AI something. Let's say name it Michael, just to anthropomorphize it for a second. No, actually, Michael is an authorized delegate for all actions I might want to take. And I don't want to have to reauthorize this entity for every individual payment they make, for every individual query that they make. And so this gets into, I think you can get very big brained about this, but our initial legal position basically is like an AI is ultimately acting on delegated legal authority for whoever like creates it or whoever's account it's linked to, right? So if we create an account on behalf of Dave and Dave sets up an agent and the agent does a bunch of things, Dave can't come back to us and go, well, no, that was my AI doing that. It's like, well, sure, but like legally it was you, Dave, right? Like we don't care that the AI is there.
That absolutely makes sense. But do you actually have to get the client to sign a new set of terms and conditions, or is that implied in the existing conditions?
It's a really interesting question. It's not where our terms today include language, but I would expect as we see more and more of our customers looking to do this, we would agree explicit terms with both our customer and any underlying beneficiary, right? Because we operate this kind of B2B to X model where the underlying beneficiary can be a retail consumer, or they can be a corporate, or they can be any number of things.
As you're talking, it's sort of really making my brain kind of fizz quite a lot, because I spent a lot of time looking at things like wealth management, also business banking, and ignoring the large corporates for the moment. If you look at small businesses, one of the problems in small business banking is business owners have no idea what the bank is offering them. It's like there is a market stall, but most of the market stall is hidden behind a curtain.
No, totally.
You know, thinking about what you're saying, it feels, well, actually, you could just turn all of that on its head by bringing to the customer what it needs in that kind of context-friendly way. So the agent has to understand you and your business and your behaviors. And by the time it's spent a couple of weeks looking at your Zero or Sage integrations and all the other bits and pieces.
Doesn't even need a couple of weeks. I mean, it can do it in seconds, right? It needs weeks and months of data, but it needs seconds to look at it.
Okay, so there you go. I mean, it's really making me think about one of the magic things of Gen AI is it opens up research to the world. Like, if you want to find something, now you can use AI to go and find research and compile that research into something digestible in a way that, if you're not an academic, is almost impossible to do at the moment. And it's sort of that discoverability, which is incredible. And it feels, well, this could change the banking paradigm. So not only will businesses be more efficient, but they'll be smarter as well.
They don't just need to be businesses. I'll give you an example. So like all founders, I am absolutely like cash broke, right?
No, I've got our tiny violins out. So.
Yeah. And my wife is also a venture-backed founder CEO. And so we're absolutely pushed to the limit. We've got a toddler. So we got like tons of childcare money going out the door. And when we bought our house, so I'm British through my mom. My wife is not, but she's married to me, didn't yet have indefinite leave to remain. When we bought our house, because she didn't have indefinite leave to remain, we had to put 25% down. So we didn't expect this because we thought we'd be able to do 10% down. So that was like all the cash that we could possibly have had as savings gone in an instant. And we were very clever. I was very clever. Got us into a 5-year fixed term mortgage at 1.14%. Yes. Pretty good at banking. Thank you. But we were like, we need some cash. This is not working. That kid's 3 years old now. This is just like miserable. We don't have the money for holidays, blah, blah, blah. And we were like, do we need to move? Do we need to move somewhere smaller? Do we need to like remortgage the house? Blah, 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 blah. And we called up our mortgage advisor, lovely guy up north named Francis. And Francis was like, instead of remortgaging or like moving, where you'd have stamp duty, got an early break, blah, blah, blah. He's like, you can actually just borrow more from HSBC. You could just borrow more. And then you keep your beautiful 1.14%. And so this is like a classic example of something that AI should have done for me. You know what I mean? I should have been able to go to HSBC and be like, help me figure out how to solve this problem. And they would have been like, oh yeah, cool. No, here is the product, right? And instead, I have this lovely person called Francis, and he's definitely earned his keep. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm very happy with Francis, but like, I just didn't know, to your point about like, you don't know what the secret menu is of things that like will keep you from shooting yourself in the foot and spending and losing so much more money than you had to.
Look, I think what that does is it begins to give an insight into the possibilities for innovation. So you kind of need core bits of functionality, but if something Dharmesh and I have been thinking about is where is the kind of true innovation in banking? So as agents are going in, what it seems like is they're doing the sort of work of human beings. So they're optimizing existing processes. And that's the whole story of digital transformation, is fluffing the existing processes, isn't it? Whereas I think this sounds like it opens the door to just changing that dynamic, which I think is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, it's both, right? I mean, the tragic thing about the examples that I've given is that if this vision comes to pass, Francis will not have a job. But if I'm being very honest, I don't really think that in a tech-forward business, like a mortgage broker should be a human being, really. That feels like it should be a completely automated job. And similarly, like corporate treasury, you might want a human being to oversee it because you probably have some like risk tolerances, right? Where you're like, okay, cool. Exactly how much of a pillow do I want to have to deal with shit happening? Because we all know shit happens. But should that be a full-time person's job? I don't know. I mean, maybe, but it sure feels like a hell of a lot of the time and effort that person spends today could be dramatically like AI assisted.
So in terms of Griffin and what you're doing at the moment with this new server, have you got people coming to you? You're actively out marketing it. Where does it stay in terms of the sort of sales?
I think we're super early and we're on the bleeding edge. So what I mean by that is, yes, we have customers coming and asking for it. We also have people who are not customers coming and asking for it, who are never going to be customers because they're like either window shopping or they want something, but they don't actually know how to put the puzzle pieces together. The reality, though, is that like right now, there is a very large wave of venture capital financing flowing into these businesses. And for most of them, payments will be the last thing that they do because they have to actually figure out the business model, the thing that they're trying to solve for, et cetera. So I think we're probably about 6 to 12 months ahead of the actual market demand, but that's a good place for us to be because I don't really see anyone else having any kind of stall out in market for this at all on the banking level.
Yeah. And again, in terms of your vision for it as a piece of product, I mean, it's not going to be a static, I presume this means that this opens the door to a new set of possibilities for you as a business.
Yeah, but we're not looking to set in stone an AI strategy when the landscape shifts every 3 months. That's ridiculous. So we're like, okay, cool. We have enough feedback and market visibility to know that this is a thing that will get used by some amount of people today. We don't even know if this is the final form of this, though. Like, where's the job to be done? An MCP server enables an AI to have context about systems that it integrates with. But even now, Anthropic is moving away from that towards direct integrations with trusted parties that get the like Anthropic seal of approval. And for banking, they want that much more than the, hey, download this file from GitHub and install it in this configuration folder. And so we're very conscious that this is a little bit of a thing of the moment, but it's a thing of the moment where we're committing to adapting our strategy as things move, because we do think that this is not going away. And we do think that this is going to be in demand from our customers. And we don't think that anyone else is, frankly, like capable of doing this. So we might as well be first and kind of be on the bleeding edge and be willing to learn and be a little bit raw and exposed and make some mistakes, but at least make some mistakes with our customers. I generally am like a really big fan of, we don't build stuff that people aren't asking to pay for, basically, or that people aren't visibly using. And so going back to what I said at the beginning, like the impetus for this was the customers were basically already doing it. They were just doing it in like a rawer and less safe form. So it's, okay, cool. Let's solve that problem. Okay, cool. Having solved that problem, this opens up a bunch of new doors. Like, those are interesting. Let's explore that. But we're not trying to get too far out ahead of the market. We want to stay very close to where the market is.
Do you see anyone at the moment doing anything more advanced with, let's say, multi-agent systems? So that, do you have a client that's saying, okay, I want to connect to my bank, but I also need my bank agent to talk to my accounting agent, that also potentially in the future, my solicitor agent?
Could be very interesting. My wife runs an AI business, and so I get to find out what's actually happening on the bleeding edge of AI from her. And she was like, the real hotness right now is like agent to agent communication systems. And I'm like, sure, that sounds great. No one is actually talking to me and asking about that right now. So that just means that if like more of the agentic to traditional system stuff starts flowing through in 6 to 18 months, the agent to agent stuff will start to flow through more seriously commercially in 12 to 24 months.
That's fascinating. So I'm intrigued on, we've had open banking for several years now, and we've seen a flurry of kind of fintechs and some new front ends. I have to say nothing game changing really. And I know people will argue and say, well, yeah, but what about Wise and da-da-da. But I mean, nothing really to take away from the bank front ends, which have seemed to have caught up with a lot of, I guess, the players like Plum and Clio, and that were doing some fancy stuff with the data. But I still don't see anything game changing in that. And what I mean is, I guess for me personally, when I take some financial advice, it's always caveated with, oh yeah, but you need to speak to your accountant on a tax basis. And because this is to do with the trust, you're going to need to speak to your solicitor.
Oh, you sound like you've got very exotic banking relationships.
Complex.
You're one of these offshore rich people that labor is desperately trying to not have flee the country. Anyway.
So my friend who this is a joke. No, seriously, when I look at the open banking stuff, I don't see anything game changing, but I could certainly see something much more powerful, especially as previously, like when I was in a startup, we had exactly the same issues. When I was running a startup, we still had the same issues. I have to speak to the bank, then I have to speak to the CFO, then I have to speak to the solicitor. And one decision about an investment that the company wants to make has to go to several parties. We all have to conflab separately, and then we brings it back to me, and then have to make a decision. And that takes weeks, and there's all these Chinese whispers in the way. But I kind of figure if everyone had a kind of like an agent that they could just collaborate, then this whole process would be much sooner. And now, as I was thinking that, we now start to see these posts on LinkedIn about the unicorn companies that'll be like 5 men or 10 men. But do you think we'll ever get to stuff like that?
I do. I mean, let's not forget, though, that Instagram was bought for $1 billion with 11 people.
Yeah.
And WhatsApp wasn't that dissimilar. I think that's always been possible. The reality, though, is that those businesses were not businesses. They were customer acquisition vehicles that had no business model, but where a more mature network effects business looked at it and went, great, I'm going to take that offline before it gets too much of a steamroll, and I'm going to roll that into my thing. And I'll figure out how to make money from it later, which in the case of Instagram, obviously Zuck was very successful with, and WhatsApp, they're starting to roll out ads this much later, and WhatsApp for Business obviously makes some amount of money. There's an interesting question for me, which is, the AI revolution enables people to do things at a level of efficiency and productivity that is unquestionably a big deal. And for some businesses will require that, or will enable them to fully automate functions that they might not have been able to automate in the past. And that may mean that we get billion-dollar companies with single-digit employees. Again, more of them. But I also think, at least at the moment, that a lot of the hype around companies like that is being driven by hype around companies that VCs think will turn into that is being driven by two things. One of which is companies that are essentially just passing on inference infrastructure costs. And so are the margins there actually? Probably not. Definitely not like your sort of historic SaaS margins, or where the reality is it's a curiosity. And so Lovable's super cool. Obviously, it's experienced explosive growth. There's got to be an upper limit on how many apps the universe needs at the end of the day. Like a human being does not need to build an app a month, a new app every month. And this was always the fallacy with SaaS as a business line, right? So VCs loved SaaS because they're like, oh, it's amazing. It's forever recurring, blah, 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 blah. And the margins are incredible. It's like, well, it turns out that if the margins are incredible and it's forever recurring, competition will eventually erode those margins. Sorry, I said economics. Haha. So you will eventually get competition until the margins are eroded, if it's actually that good of an opportunity. And so there's an open question for me around what the steady state margins for AI looks like. And let's be honest, until I think probably like early last year, no one had any fucking clue who was going to make any money out of this at all. And even now, it's okay, does being the model maker make you money? Not necessarily. It like distribution makes you money. Distribution has always been the thing that makes you money in technology. And so the fact that Anthropic and OpenAI have these massive consumer subscriber bases is what makes them immensely lucrative. And if you look at the most valuable technology companies that have ever been created in history, they're all consumer businesses. that maybe had a business arm to them, but they all ultimately had consumer or retail distribution. Anyway, sorry, very long ramble. It took us quite far off piste.
No, it's cool. I mean, we're sort of actually coming to time, and I was just wondering if people want to find out more about your product. Is the website a good place to go? Are you demoing it? What's the place to visit?
This is horrible of me. The person to visit is Mo on our team here. It's just Mo, M-O @griffin.com. He is our current sort of customer-facing, market-facing AI champion. There is stuff on the blog, which is griffin.com/blog. There will be more, but I think we are at a place where we're doing a little bit of marketing about it, but we're doing more privately that we're probably not going to be in a position to talk about for some amount of time.
Okay, fantastic.
One more question. We are all used to, or we all know that the social media is listening to us, whether it's through the clicks or actual voice, right? We all sense it. We all know it, right? And now we're seeing these little AIs on a chip you wear on your lapel and it transcribes your meetings, da, 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 da. Do you see a place for something like this in banking where it just listens and potentially, look, don't shirk straight away. It's not all about selling. It potentially could interject and say, well, I think this conversation is fraudulent. And somebody's trying to convince you to send money to Mr. Wallace over here. And I don't think we should do this transaction. You see what I mean? It could help protect you as well as give you advice.
That's quite interesting. It's interesting, especially when you look at like how Apple sort of has chosen to position themselves on the AI front, where they're like, look, we built the model, but all data stays on device, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you could easily see that sitting in iMessage or whatever. And they're like, yeah, this person who just messaged you who says they need money, like that's not actually your child. And it doesn't mean that social media is there listening in. It means that on-core private safety mechanisms can be designed. Fraudsters is they're so goddamn clever and they're so convincing, and they'll just keep finding kind of new ways in through stuff. It's such an old art that, I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, right? We call it APP fraud, but it's just fraud, right? It's just old school fraud. That's all it is. There's nothing new about it. It's like, how do I convince someone to part with their money? But yeah, technology just means we can do more of it faster to people who are further away.
Very cool. Brilliant. Well, listen, we look forward to having you back in a few months' time and seeing how things are going.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be like the poster child for FCA AI enforcement as I get like clapped in irons. Well,
Can we at least say Bank Boss says AI will destroy your jobs? No, I'm just joking.
Yeah, exactly. Bank Boss says AI is here to protect you. I don't know. I mean, Bank Boss can say just about anything. Like, you can always synthesize it if I don't literally say it.
Fantastic. Okay,
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. A pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to Dave and Dom Demystify. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe and tune in next time as we take another topic and demystify it.